You want to know what's more important than throwing away money in the strip club? Credit. Hello everybody, what is up? I'm Julia, friends call me J-Rock. Thank you for tuning in to Tumbleweed Logic one more time. You could have been anywhere in the world, but you're here with me and I appreciate that. Now, my favorite MC on the planet, Jay-Z, Mr. Sean Carter himself, dropped his 13th studio album, 444, on June 30th. And unless you've been living under a rock, you have heard the streets buzzing about this album. If you haven't yet heard it, I don't know what you're doing with your life. You should probably fix that. Now, one of the key things that Jay talked about on this album was for Black people to start thinking about building up themselves financially, start building wealth instead of spending our money foolishly, start investing, start saving, start planning for future generations financially. And what has got to be one of my favorite tracks on the entire album, The Story of OJ, Jay really hits home on the point about us starting to think more smartly about our money. You know, you can blow money on bottles, but that doesn't help your future generations. And on that same track, he touched on credit. And for as long as I can remember, Black people have been known to have bad credit, especially Black men. You know, there's songs, there's movies, there's jokes about Black men, they don't have good credit, they gotta borrow their girls' credit, and then Black people overall just don't have good credit. And for me, I'm just not okay with that. There's no reason why other groups of people in this country can have good credit and we're the ones struggling, can't get our cars, can't get our houses, we can't get credit for nothing. Why is that? So after listening to the album and thinking about it, I was like, you know what? Let me go ahead and talk to my people out there to make a video specifically for you on how to improve your credit, how to get your credit to be impeccable. So let go. Actually, we may have to hesitate a little bit. We may have to take it all the way back, get a little remedial with it, because I don't know for who's watching how much you know about credit, how much you don't know, and I don't want to start running off talking about how to improve your credit and you don't even know the basics. So let's get to the basics. For those of you who are a little bit more credit savvy, you can skip ahead in the video. So first things first, what is credit? Questions that need answers. Credit is your ability to get something right now by promising to pay for it later. Okay, what do I mean by that? So glad you asked. Let's take an example. Let's say that you want to buy a car. The car that you want is $20,000, but you just don't happen to have $20,000 just sitting around in the backyard. What do? You could walk away and say, I'm not going to get that car, but if you have credit, you may be able to go in and get that car by promising the dealership and the bank that you will pay the car off later. Depending on how good or bad your credit is, you may be able to get the car with a very small down payment or no down payment at all, because the dealer and the bank think that you're going to make good on the promise to pay it off later. So credit is basically your ability to borrow money. So now you're wondering, okay, well, if that's what credit is, it's my ability to borrow, how do I know what my ability is? Where do I even get that information? That's where something called a credit report comes in. Now, your credit report is basically how it sounds. It's a report that has all of your credit account information all in one place. It has all your, pretty much your financial skeletons. Think of it like a Carfax on you. When you go to buy a used car, the first thing you're asking for is that Carfax. You want to know how many owners the car has had, did they smoke in the car? You want to know, has the car had any damage or any work done on it? You want to know everything there is to know before you buy that car. When it comes to your credit, lenders or creditors, they want to know that before they extend you any credit or any ability to buy something right now by paying for it later, because they're basically fronting the money for you, they want to know, well, how many owners have you had? How many debts do you have outstanding? Have you paid your bills on time? Et cetera, et cetera. So it's basically your financial, your personal Carfax that lenders and creditors are going to pull to know more about you. Now, if you're wondering where your credit report even comes from or how does all of that information get to one place, the companies that are holding your credit accounts or holding your bills, they report that information monthly to 3 credit reporting agencies or credit bureaus, you hear them referred to. It's Equifax, Experian, and TransUnion. These 3 agencies collect all of that information from those different companies who are holding your credit accounts, and they compile them into those reports. The good news is for you that those agencies are required by federal law, the Fair Credit Reporting Act, to give you a free copy of your credit report every single year. each of the individual bureaus. So that's 3 reports a year. All you have to do is go to a website called annualcreditreport.com and request your credit report. So that gives you a chance to see what's going on with your credit, what accounts you actually have. You know, are the accounts that are on there right? Are they paid up? Are they not paid up? You can go and request those reports and figure out what's happening with your credit. So we've talked about credit, we've talked about credit reports. Now we have to talk about probably the most important thing when it comes to credit, and that's your credit score. Your credit score is a 3-digit number that is calculated to determine your credit worthiness, or how good or bad your credit is. And it's mathematically calculated based on information in your credit report. The idea on this 3-digit number is that the higher the number is, the better your credit, the lower the number is, the worse your credit. Now, we've all seen a lot of the ads and commercials for different types of credit scores, you know, on Credit Karma or Credit Sesame. There are a bunch of different credit scores that are offered out there. And I know it can get confusing because it's like, well, what's the difference between all of these different apps and what's the difference between all the scores? So let me break those down for you real quick. When it comes to the credit scores that are used in most lending decisions, there are 2 types. The first one is the FICO score. Now, the FICO score is issued by the Fair Isaac Corporation, hence the name FICO, and it came on the scene in 1989. However, according to their website, still about 90% of lenders are using the FICO score to make credit decisions. So basically determine whether or not you get credit and how much credit you get. The FICO score ranges from 300 to 850. And like we talked about with the credit score, overall, the higher the number is, the better your credit. So if you've got a 700, 750, 800, 850, you're on the top end of credit scores, you're probably getting the best credit opportunities. And if your score is like 500 or below, you can expect that you're not going to get the same credit opportunities. But then in 2006, another credit score came on the scene, and that's called the Vantage score. Now, the Vantage score is a score behind a lot of the free apps out there. So Credit Karma, Credit Sesame, Credit.com. Now, the Vantage score was actually developed by the 3 credit bureaus that we talked about earlier, Experian, Equifax, and TransUnion. They developed their own credit scoring model to basically rival the FICO score and help to make credit decisions as well. Initially, when they first came out, they didn't have the same scoring model, 300 to 850, but they then shifted their model over time, and now it's pretty much the same as the FICO with the same score range, 300 to 850. So now that we've gotten the basics out the way, credit report, credit score, let's now get into the topic about how to actually improve your credit, how to get good credit. First things first, if you're looking for a credit video that's talking about how to boost your score in 30 days, get 8 credit cards, and then do this jig, this is not the video for you. The key to getting good credit is knowing what's impacting your credit score and by how much, and making sure you're doing those things. That's what we're going to talk about real quick. Now, like I said a minute ago, there are 2 different types of credit scores, the FICO score and the Vantage score. But honestly, the things that impact your credit score are the same no matter which score you look at. They may be tweaked slightly, but overall it's the same stuff. So what I'm gonna do is break down the FICO score for you because I really like the fact that they have specific percentages of all the things that are impacting your credit. The Vantage score doesn't have that same kind of clean breakdown, but it's still the same type of stuff. So you can apply what I'm saying about the FICO score to the Vantage score and still be straight. Now, the FICO score breaks down into 5 major buckets. The first one is payment history. 35% of your FICO score is payment history. Do you pay your bills on time? It's the biggest chunk of your credit score. And it only makes sense because you think about what we talked about in the beginning. Credit is your ability to borrow, your ability to get something right now by promising to pay for it later. If you show that when you promise to pay, you don't pay, no one's gonna wanna give you any credit and your score goes down. Only makes sense. So if you've got old credit cards and other debts that you haven't paid, that's gonna weigh heavily on your score because it shows that you can't stick to your word and pay things off or pay things the way that you promised you would in the beginning. So the first way to improve your credit is to pay your bills on time. And I know that sounds really, really basic, but it makes up 35% of your FICO score is how well you pay your bills. How well do you pay that credit card? How well do you pay that car? You know, that's what they're looking at. That's easy to say, pay your bills on time. Suppose you ain't got it. Suppose I can't pay it. The thing is, if you can't pay, let's say because your paychecks fall on a different cycle with your bills, then you need to call up the people that hold those accounts and say, can I change my payment date? Is there something I can do to shift my payment date around to have it align more with when you get paid? Or let's say you don't have the money to pay the bill in full, go back to your lenders and creditors and ask them, hey, I don't have the money for the bill right now, but can I make some sort of a payment arrangement where I can pay things off slowly to still pay off the bill, but they don't report it negatively to the credit bureaus and have your scores go down? And if you really want to improve your credit score, you have to be willing to make those tough decisions. You have to be willing to sacrifice to get those bills paid, because again, 35% of your FICO score is payment history. Now, the second bucket is the amount you owe. And they're looking at the amount you owe against how much you can actually borrow. So let's take a credit card, for example. Let's say you get a credit card with a $1,000 limit on it. The lenders are looking to see that with that $1,000 limit, have you spent the full $1,000? That as soon as you got the credit, you went and spent up the whole thing. They're looking to see, are you spending every single dollar that you can borrow? And that makes up 30% of your FICO score. So the second key to improving your credit is to keep the amount that you're actually using from your credit available balance. You're keeping it as far away as possible from the amount that you can actually borrow. Now, the recommendation from credit experts, especially when it comes to credit cards, is for you to keep the amount that you're spending on those credit cards below 30% of what you can actually spend. So if you've got a $1,000 limit, the recommendation is for you to only spend $300 or less. Honestly, the best recommendation when it comes to credit cards is that if you're using the card in a given month, you should be paying it off in full. But if you have to revolve or carry a balance forward to the next month, be sure to keep the amount that you're using on the card below that 30% to keep your credit score really, really high. And the easiest way to make sure that you're not running up your credit cards, running up every dollar you can borrow, is to make sure that you're living within your means. You're not buying things you can't afford, that you know that you can't pay off, and live where your dollars will allow you to live. You can't ball out, get the $5,000 credit limit and you out here spending the $5,000 knowing that you don't have the money to pay back, because that's how your credit score drops. Make sense? Now, the third bucket of the FICO score is the length of your credit history. The score is looking at, well, how long have you had your credit accounts open? Has it just been a year or so? Do you have a long-standing credit history? Are you opening accounts and closing them quickly? They're looking at the age of your accounts. How long have things been open? That's 15% of your FICO score. Some of that is unavoidable. You open credit when you can finally open some credit, but it shows you the importance of starting to build up credit. That's why I can't stand people who say the best way to get good credit is to buy everything in cash. No. The whole idea of credit is that you don't have the cash for something. If you're money bags and you can buy a house cash, by all means, but for most people, they need credit to be able to buy a house, to be able to buy a car. So the next way for you to really begin to improve your credit and really build up that credit score is to start to build your credit history. I would recommend getting a retail card, so a card from Gap or Best Buy or something that has a low limit where you can buy something and then pay it off, buy something and pay it off, every month or whatever. And that way it shows that you're starting to establish a credit relationship, starting to establish credit history, that when you're ready to go make that big purchase like a car or a house, they can see that you've started to build credit. Or if you don't want to get a retail card, you can always get, a Chase card or any of these other credit cards, but, with small limits, and just pay things off, pay your Netflix bill, pay your phone bill, charge things to the card, and then pay it off, and continue to build your history that way, so that when you're finally ready to use that credit, that you have an impeccable credit history. Now, the fourth bucket is new credit, and new credit makes up 10% of your FICO score. What do I mean by new credit? How many new accounts are you trying to open? How many new credit accounts are you looking to get? Are you constantly running your credit trying to open up a new account? That shows that you may be very, very risky, or that you're cash poor and you're looking to survive on the credit that's out there. That signals to lenders, hey, this person may not be able to pay us back because once they're done with us, or once they can't pay us, they're just opening up another account. There is kind of a disclaimer to that, because I know people are gonna say, well, I have to run my credit to try to get a house or try to get a car, and sometimes I have to go to different lenders. That may look like a bunch of inquiries or new credit requests on my credit score or on my credit report, what do I do about that? They do take that into account. When the credit reporting agencies are looking at your credit report and when your credit score is calculated, they're looking, I think it's a 2-week time frame. Don't quote me on that. I can put it in the comment box or the description box below. But they look at the inquiries that are run all at the same time in about a 2-week span or so. They're all related. If you're looking for a mortgage and they see that you run with a couple of different banks, they know that you're shopping around. The same thing goes for buying a car. They know that you're shopping around. So some of that is, they're not really going to pay attention to that because they can account for the fact that you're trying to actually do something. But if every single month you're running your score for something, you're running your credit for something, they're looking at that a lot more negatively. Now, it only impacts 10% of your score, so it's not as big as payment history and it's not as big as the amount you owe against what you can borrow, but it's still something to definitely pay attention to help improve your credit score. So my recommendation is only request new credit if it's absolutely necessary. Don't go getting credit cards and applying for this card and this card because you get something in the mail that says you're pre-approved. Don't do it. If it's not a need, avoid it altogether. Shred it. Don't apply. If you know you're not ready to get a car, don't go run your credit for it. If you know you're not ready to get a house, don't go run your credit for it. Wait until you're ready to do these big things, these big purchases, and then run your credit at that time so that you can keep your score, keep that piece of your score intact. And the final piece of your FICO score, the final piece of your FICO score is the mix of credit. And that also makes up 10% of your score. So what do I mean by mix of credit? The score is looking at what types of credit do you have? Do you just have credit cards, or do you have a mix of different types of credit? So do you have credit cards, with banks? Do you have retail cards? Do you have a car? Do you have a mortgage? Do you have student loans? They're looking at all the mixes of credit that you have to see that you're a responsible borrower, that you can maintain different types of credit accounts. It's not just credit cards, or it's not just a mortgage, that you can handle all of these different types of credit so that when you go in looking for credit, they know that by looking at your score. Now you're probably looking at me like, wait a minute, you just told me to not apply for a whole bunch of new credit, and now you're telling me that the last part of the credit score is what kind of credit I have? What am I supposed to do with that? Relax. You can still build your credit with a different mix of credit, even if you're not applying to something all the time. You can get a retail card for a store that you really like, that you shop at often, and you can also get a credit card that's issued by a bank, a Chase or a Bank of America. That already starts to set you apart because there are different types of credit cards. And then a lot of us already have student loans, so that counts as a type of credit as well. Are you paying on those on time? Or if you've maybe had a charge card, something where you have to pay it off in full, you have that along with a retail card. There are a bunch of different ways to diversify your credit, and there's nothing wrong with applying for things and spacing them out. When it comes to the new credit issue, they're looking at, are you trying to do it very quickly? Are you trying to do it every couple of weeks, every couple of months? You're trying to look around and find new credit. But if you want to be responsible, there's nothing wrong with applying for one thing and then waiting a little bit and applying for something else and waiting a little bit. There's nothing wrong with that. So don't bite my head off. It is still possible to diversify the type of credit you have and still maintain that other 10% where you're not searching for new credit all the time. So that's it to the FICO score, and that's really it onto how to improve your credit and how to get good credit. There are 5 ways to do that based on how your credit score is broken down. The key is to think the way that they think, to focus on the things that they're focusing on. Now that you have the breakdown of what impacts your score the most, you know where to focus your efforts. You don't need a jig. You don't need 18 credit cards trying to do these strategies that you see on YouTube and on the internet. That's how you find yourself actually getting more messed up, because if you don't follow it the way that they do it, somehow things always get messed up and you may find yourself in a worse credit position. It really is simple when you think the way that they think. That's the key to having a good credit score. It's following the same strategy of the calculation that they're using for your credit score. But let me know if you like this video. Let me know if you think this was helpful, if you want to see something similar, if you think that my strategy is all the way off on how to improve your credit score. Please leave some comments below, show me some love. And for the record, let me just say this, there is nothing wrong with credit. There's nothing wrong with having credit cards. Don't let anybody tell you that there's something wrong with it. It only becomes a problem when you're not being responsible and you're not exercising discipline. If you exercise discipline, all of these buckets we discussed will fall into place and you won't have a problem with credit. But until next time, guys, I want you guys to laugh hard, love hard, dream big. This is J-Rock out of the building.